There is something most people never realize. The biggest changes in your life almost never announce themselves. They don't arrive with fireworks. They don't come with a dramatic sign from the universe. They don't knock on your door and introduce themselves. They begin quietly, almost invisibly, long before you can point to any evidence that something is changing. And that silence is exactly why so many people give up. They look around at their circumstances and assume nothing is happening. They wake up to the same room, the same job, the same conversations, the same routines, and they conclude that their efforts have failed. They believe that because they cannot see movement, there is no movement at all. But what if the greatest transformation of your life always begins where your eyes cannot follow? What if the moment you decide that nothing is changing is often the very moment everything has already begun to shift beneath the surface? Stay with me, because by the end of this conversation, you'll understand why life doesn't change loudly. It changes quietly. You'll discover why the invisible changes inside you always come before the visible changes around you, and why learning to trust that quiet process may be the most important decision you ever make. Most people are taught to believe that reality creates their feelings. Something good happens, and they feel hopeful. Something goes wrong, and they feel discouraged. They spend their entire lives reacting to what they can see, hear, and touch. It seems reasonable. After all, if your bank account grows, you feel secure. If someone compliments you, you feel confident. If the relationship improves, you feel loved. But look closely. If reality truly controlled your inner world, then two people living the exact same circumstances would always feel the same way. Yet they don't. One person sees an obstacle and believes it's the end of the road. Another sees the very same obstacle and quietly believes it's preparing them for something greater. One person hears silence after sending an important message and immediately imagines rejection. Another experiences the same silence and assumes everything is unfolding perfectly. The event is identical, only the assumption is different, and that assumption becomes the experience. Life has an interesting way of reflecting what you consistently believe, even when you don't realize you're believing it. Not your passing thoughts, not the wishes you repeat once a day, but the identity you quietly return to over and over again. The story you whisper to yourself when nobody else is listening. That story becomes your emotional home. Some people live inside the story that life is difficult. Others live inside the story that opportunities somehow find them. Some secretly believe they must struggle before receiving anything good. Others naturally expect things to work out. None, none of these stories announce themselves. They're quiet, they're familiar, they're automatic. And because they're automatic, they become invisible. You don't question them because they feel like facts. But a belief repeated often enough stops feeling like a belief. It starts feeling like reality. That is where most people become trapped. They wait for the outer world to convince them to think differently. I'll feel successful once I become successful. I'll believe in myself once someone else believes in me. I'll relax once my problems disappear. But what if the order has always been reversed? What if your inner world is not the result of your life, but the blueprint your life quietly follows? Think about planting a seed. The day after it's planted, the ground looks exactly the same. A week later, it may still appear unchanged. If someone judged only by what they could see, they would assume nothing was happening. Yet beneath the soil, an extraordinary process has already begun. Roots are stretching. Life is organizing itself. Growth is happening in complete silence. The visible plant is simply the last chapter of a story that began underground. Your life often works the same way. When you begin changing the way you see yourself, nothing outside may appear different. Your schedule remains the same. Your income remains the same. The people around you remain the same. But beneath the surface, your reactions begin changing. Your expectations begin changing. Your emotional patterns begin changing. And these quiet changes eventually become impossible for reality not to reflect. This is why patience is not passive. Patience is confidence expressed through time. It is the willingness to continue believing before evidence appears. Consider how often people abandon a new way of thinking simply because they don't receive immediate proof. For 3 days, they imagine a better future. Then an old problem returns. Immediately they say, see, nothing changed. But what actually changed? The circumstance or their trust. Sometimes the old patterns appear one last time, not because you failed, but because they're losing their hold on you. Like echoes in a canyon, they continue for a moment after the original sound has ended. The mistake is believing the echo is a new voice. It's only yesterday repeating itself. Every lasting transformation asks one difficult question. Can you remain loyal to the person you're becoming before the world recognizes them? That question separates temporary motivation from genuine change. Anyone can feel confident after success. Very few people choose confidence before success. Anyone can feel peaceful after the storm passes. The deeper practice is discovering peace while the clouds are still overhead. This doesn't mean pretending difficulties don't exist. It means refusing to let them define who you are. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. If your reflection appears tired, you don't polish the mirror. You care for yourself. Yet many people spend years trying to polish the mirror of life. They change jobs, relationships, cities, possessions, routines, again and again. But wherever they go, they carry the same assumptions. The mirror faithfully reflects the same identity, wearing different clothes. Until identity changes, the reflection has no reason to. This isn't punishment. It's consistency. Life is remarkably consistent. It reflects what has become natural within you. Not because the universe is testing you, but because consciousness naturally expresses itself through experience. Think about how you speak to yourself during ordinary moments, not during meditation, not while listening to inspiring videos, but while washing dishes, driving home, waiting in line, lying awake at night. Those quiet conversations reveal the identity you've accepted. Do you constantly prepare for disappointment? Do you rehearse conversations that haven't happened yet? Do you expect people to misunderstand you? Do you assume good things always happen to someone else? These tiny inner habits seem harmless because no one else hears them, yet they quietly shape the emotional atmosphere you live in every day. And emotions repeated often enough become expectations. Expectations influence decisions. Decisions create experiences. Experiences reinforce identity. The cycle continues until someone becomes aware enough to interrupt it. Awareness is where freedom begins. Not because awareness instantly changes your life, but because you cannot change what you never notice. The moment you catch yourself repeating an old story, you've already created a small distance between yourself and that story. You are no longer completely identified with it. You become the observer instead of the prisoner. That single shift changes everything because once you realize you are observing your assumptions, you also realize you are capable of choosing new ones. Not overnight, not perfectly, but consistently. Imagine a river flowing through a valley. For years it follows the same path. The water doesn't question it. It simply continues. Where the channel has already been carved, your mind behaves similarly. It follows familiar emotional pathways because they're comfortable. Creating a new pathway feels unnatural at first, not because it's wrong, because it's unfamiliar. This is why so many meaningful changes initially feel fake. People say, I don't believe this new story. Of course not. You've repeated the old one thousands of times. The new one is still a stranger. Give it time. Every belief was once unfamiliar. Even your doubts had to be learned. What if you began each morning with one quiet decision? Not to force happiness, not to deny challenges, but simply to remember who you are choosing to become. Before checking your phone, before reading the news, before entering yesterday's concerns, spend a few moments imagining yourself as the version of you who already lives with peace, confidence, and quiet certainty. Notice how that person walks through the day, how they respond to delays, how they speak to themselves, how they interpret uncertainty. Then carry that feeling with you, even if only for a few minutes. Those minutes matter more than you think. At night, instead of replaying everything that went wrong, gently ask yourself a different question. If today reflected the person I want to become, what would I remember? Allow your imagination to rewrite the emotional meaning of the day, not to escape reality, but to train your mind toward the reality you wish to create. Little by little, your inner conversations begin changing. And once those conversations change, your emotional home changes. Eventually, your expectations change. Then your choices change. And one day, your circumstances quietly begin catching up. People may call it luck. They may say you were in the right place at the right time. They'll notice the promotion, the relationship, the opportunity, the confidence. What they won't see are the hundreds of invisible moments that came first. The mornings you chose faith over fear, the evenings you released old stories, the quiet decisions no one applauded, the identity no one witnessed being built. Like a sculptor shaping stone, every small choice removed something that no longer belonged, not with force, with patience, until the person hidden inside was finally revealed. Perhaps that's why the deepest transformations rarely need to announce themselves. A mountain doesn't become magnificent in a single day. The ocean doesn't rush to prove its depth. The sunrise never argues with the darkness. Each simply becomes what it already is, quietly and completely. Maybe your life is asking the same of you, not to chase proof, not to demand immediate results, but to become so rooted in the person you choose to be that the outer world has no choice but to meet you there. Because life doesn't always whisper to confuse you. Sometimes it whispers because the most profound truths never need to shout. And one day, you'll look back at a life that seems to have changed overnight. Everyone else will see the moment your world transformed. Only you will know that it began long before anyone noticed. It began in the quiet. It began in the invisible. It began the moment you stopped asking whether life had changed and started becoming the person for whom change was inevitable.